I'm not sure what Stacey's doing next. She might, dip her toe in politics. I mean, third grade is coming up. It's a very fraught time in life.
There's your next job. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and talking about your books.
Thank you for the weather.
Yeah, the weather's great. So first of all, just talk to me a little bit about why you decided to write these 2 children's books at this point in your life and your career.
My mom, for most of my growing up years, was a librarian. She was a reference librarian with, yes, yay libraries. And so when I was growing up, I literally would sleep in the stacks. I was in daycare on the campus, and daycare ended before my mom's job did. And so we would sleep in the stacks. So I would sleep surrounded by books. My dad was a shipyard worker, and he was usually gone first thing in the morning before anyone was awake. And so throughout the week, my mom would read to us, and then my dad would tell us these fantastic stories on Friday nights. It was like a very G-rated version of Game of Thrones, because he would have to remember the story he told the week before, and he'd have to tell a part of the story to appease all 6 of his children, who all had special things we wanted in the story. And it got very convoluted, and by the 7th season, it wasn't really worth anything. But because of that, I grew up with this deep love, not only of reading, but of storytelling. And I came about it because my mom would read us these amazing books, and my father would tell these extraordinary stories. And for me, writing children's books was the last version of writing I thought I would get into. But it is extraordinarily exciting to me because it gives me the chance to not only tell stories to the Stacey I was, it gives me a chance to re-examine who I was and think about how it made me who I am.
So both of these books are biographical. I can't speak today.
It's okay.
It says you were like a shy kid who got lost in books to an extent. It's hard to believe that you were ever that shy.
I wasn't shy. My brother and I were talking about this today. I was an introvert before I knew that was a word. I was just quiet, and I wasn't terribly outgoing. I wasn't afraid of people. Shyness tends to be about being nervous and afraid, which is perfectly acceptable. I was more particular, and I didn't want to make mistakes in front of other people. And so I did the things I knew how to do. I knew how to read. Reading I was really good at. And in books, I could be anything, I could do anything. But yes, I think what we often describe as shyness for some is just, I hadn't figured out how to be with other people just yet. And so books made it a lot easier than other kids did.
Yeah, I think it was in Remarkable books you talked about growing up how you felt a little awkward and kind of unsure of yourself, and also that you noticed the differences between race and class and other students and your classmates, and then you met Julie, who's like your first friend. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I grew up in Gulfport, Mississippi, and when you think of Mississippi, you do not think about it being one of the locations for the Vietnamese boat lift of the 1970s. And in the 1970s, a number of Vietnamese families were resettled in Gulfport and Biloxi and along the coast. And Julie her name was Hado, her American name was Julie. She was one of the children who came to the US. Julie was very shy, in part because she was naturally shy and diffident, but part of it was also she was speaking English as a second language. And in a place like Gulfport, Mississippi, which was very much a black and white city, this was a very unusual thing. She was a refugee. Her family was trying to integrate and or assimilate, and she was learning how to be a kid, learning how to speak English, and doing it all in a space that, through history has had a complex relationship with race. And so when I met Julie on the playground that day, I was reading a book, and I think someone teased her about how she was speaking, and I defended her, and we ended up, so I don't do this in the story, but I defended her, and we started talking, and I told her, come with me, and we started reading books together because she really wanted to improve her English. And she didn't make me talk when we sat together. She would let me just read my book, and she would sit by me on the playground and just leave me alone. So she was the best kind of friend I could imagine. And so we started reading together because that was a safe space for both of us. For her, it was a chance to learn to read. For me, it was a chance to learn to be friends with someone who wasn't related to me by blood and obligated to do so. And it gave us both a chance to really explore not only each other, but each other's stories. But I also remember just how much fun it was to explore something new with someone. And the reason I wrote the book was that back in 2010, or 2011, I'd just become the Democratic leader in Georgia, and I get this random email, and it says, "Hi, you may not remember me, but my name is Ha Do, and you knew me as Julie." And all I remember, she's like, I don't know if you remember, because her family moved when we were in 5th grade. She said, "I don't know if you remember me, but you helped me learn to love reading, and I'm now a special needs teacher in Hawaii. And I just wanted to tell my friend Stacey, if this is you, thank you." And I was very touched. And so I wrote a book about her.
And it was really interesting, too, in the book, because you went a little bit further and you had characters from different countries and different cultures also learning to speak English and, showing the camaraderie. And I couldn't help but think, when reading this, about the number of states that are trying to ban books and trying to really talk about culture and inclusiveness. So were you thinking about, just the shift in politics or the shift in the way this country is going when you were writing or thinking about that?
Absolutely. It's informed by one experience that I had, but an experience I know children are having around this country, where they are meeting kids, and instead of being encouraged to explore the differences and the distinctions and the important stories and narratives that come along with being from somewhere else, they are being encouraged to ignore it and pretend it's not real. And I know that the richness of my history informs how I live, that my parents telling me stories about the civil rights era, explaining to us the complexities that we were experiencing as children in Gulfport in the 1970s and 80s. The first time, a school tried to take us to the last home of Jefferson Davis to go celebrate, we got a long conversation. We had a long conversation with my parents about why we are never doing that again. And that mattered because it helped center who I was. But we're also we're asking children to ignore the evidence of their eyes and the experiences of their days by telling them that they're not seeing difference. If you are a refugee from a war-torn country, you are bringing experiences, and you need a child your own age who may not have the language to describe what's happening to you, but knows you need a hug. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to embrace the language you speak at home, even though you're learning English in school. You need someone to understand that when you go home, you speak a second language, and that is a glorious thing. And you should be celebrated, not denigrated for it. And so I think book banning is nonsensical. Mm-hmm. It is inimical to learning and to education. And for me, this is a book to talk about just how great books are and how important it is for us to celebrate that with our children every day.
Absolutely. In your first book, Extraordinary Words, you talked a lot also about your mom in that book. It's a venture of you going to a spelling bee and kind of getting out of your shell a little bit. But I think what was interesting to me was the emphasis on perseverance, and that you didn't win the spelling bee the first time, came back and did it again. Is that another, I think that's another core value of yours, it seems like, that we've come to know?
I have not won many things in my life.
No, but not giving up.
Yeah, it's perfect. I love my dad, too. My dad's an awesome man. My mother shows up a little bit more because I'm writing about books and she was a librarian. But when we were kids, as I said, there's 6 of us, so my mom was responsible for taking me to the spelling bee because my older sister Andrea was trying to play basketball and my dad was taking her to her games. And so mom had the experience of the spelling bee with me, but it was incredibly important when I didn't, and I don't want to give away the ending, but I didn't win the first time. And it can be there's a moment where you think because I've lost, I am incapable of more. And I wanted to tell that story, especially when I wrote it, because there were those who were upset that I didn't wallow in my failure, that I didn't just curl up and curl into a ball and hide away, that instead of taking my L with, I don't know what they wanted. I think they wanted me to be humiliated. I'm like, no, it's a chance to learn, and it's a chance to learn early. I learned how to lose when I was in 2nd grade, so by the time I got to be 48, I was good at it.
You've been successful in so many things in your life, and I do think it's really interesting that you've been such a prolific writer as well. I mean, you've been writing for books for how long now?
20 years.
20 years? Under a pen name for what?
So my first 8 were under pen name. Would you like me to explain why?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I published my first book I wrote it in 98, 99. I published it in 2000. It was a romance novel. Thank you. Now, I wrote it under the pen name Selena Montgomery for 2 reasons. One was at the exact same time I published Rules of Engagement, my romantic suspense novel based on my ex-boyfriend's dissertation. I also published my first legal article on the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption. No one was going to read romance by Alan Greenspan. And you can't publish a tax article under a pseudonym. That does not start well. And so for me, I asked my editor, and she said I could do it under pseudonym. So I was sitting there at like 3 a.m, and I really liked my S's because I've been spelling my name for a very long time. And so I was watching an A&E biography of Elizabeth Montgomery, who played Samantha on Bewitched. And so the last name, I was like, ooh, Montgomery. And if you remember, her evil cousin was Serena. I didn't like my R's, but I really liked my L's. And so I was Selena Montgomery, and thus Selena Montgomery was born.
Wow. That's amazing. But obviously you've gotten past using your pen name, and you have another book that's coming out next month, right?
I do. So I wrote 8 Selena Montgomery novels. Then I wrote 2 Stacey Abrams nonfiction works, Lead from the Outside and Our Time Is Now. And then I wrote, I'd actually written this book called While Justice Sleeps back in 2010. Thank you. So, good. The rest of you should be clapping. It's a great book. You should read it.
So you write all the time. You do all these other amazing things. Do you sleep at all? I just have to know.
Shut up, Walter. And Sam. I sleep. I don't sleep as much as I should. I sleep more than I think I need to. But I try to organize my time so I can do all the things that matter to me. And what I've been very grateful for is that I build teams of people to do things with me. There are a lot of folks who want to do many things, but you think you have to do it all by yourself. And what I hope people read in Stacey's remarkable books, one of the most fun things was the reading club. I didn't have one when I was a kid. But the whole notion of a reading club is that they're doing it together. They're learning together, they're reading together, they're exploring together. And for most of the things I try to do it with others. I want other people to be a part of the experience, and I'd rather have 50% of something than 100% of absolutely nothing. And so while writing for me is a singular event, getting it into the world takes a whole team, and it gives me space to then do all the other things that matter, like democracy and voting rights and living inside my house because I have a job, things like that. So.
In the meantime, are you working on any more books?
I am. So I've got another children's book that is due, and it will be out this December. Thank you. Yes. I'm not sure what Stacey's doing next. She might, dip her toe in politics. I mean, 3rd grade is coming up. It's a very fraught time in life. So
There's your next job.
I don't think 3rd graders can run for president, but I will take that under advisement. And so, but no, I'm excited to be writing that book. I'm thinking about some other stories. Avery Keene has another book that's got to come out once she makes her way through Rogue Justice. Something's waiting for her on the other side, so I got to figure out what that is because my editor wants to know.
Well, we look forward to having you back when those are released.
Thank you.